everyone? Xanaro Gaming coming at y'all with another video, and in today's video I kind of want to talk about Union Arena and some recent results to happen in some tournaments this past weekend. I am on exburst.dev. They are kind enough to list some of this tournament information that they had this weekend. They had a 2K tournament and then also a side 1K tournament prizing this past weekend. And I just thought it would be very interesting to go through some of the data from these tournaments and then compile it for you guys myself, just to kind of like talk about the state of the Union Arena trading card game. In the 2K tournament that they had, they did have Blue JJK winning the tournament with Code Geass in second, and then followed up by a lot of Blue JJK coming down and through. They also had, you know, two yellow Demon Slayer decks, the Tanjiro Nezuko decks, which is awesome to see. I know that a lot of people were sleeping on Demon Slayer when it came out, but I think that some of the updates they gave us for the decks has helped these decks perform a lot better. Bringing up the rear in 8th place on that one was a purple Code Geass deck, and then another Blue JJK purple Code Geass, a Bleach deck sneaking into the top 16. Also a Muzan sneaking in the top 16. So both of these purple decks doing some really cool, interesting things. Love to see that they were able to get into top 16s. And then also just another Blue JJK, a red Academy deck, which I do love to see that, you know, the purple red or the Code Geass red Academy deck is still also viable with all the decks that are going out there. It's a very aggressive deck. If you've never played against that deck, it is really, really cool. Coming down here, we got two more with the Blue JJK and another yellow Demon Slayer taking up the rear for the top 16. I just took the data from this top 16 and then also the data for the top 16 on the side event. Now, granted, this side event is a little more, I'd say how I would like to see, you know, tournaments play with a lot of different decks. I think this one, maybe the people were, you know, since it's the side event and it's 1K, they were deciding to take some decks that, you know, they wanted to see how well they would do. So this second day is actually a lot more interesting with the tops, because you can see here that there is a lot less of the Blue JJK just absolutely walling out the top 8, where you only have, you know, Blue JJK did win the event, which is to be expected at this point, and then purple Code Geass bringing up the rear. Third place, another Blue JJK deck, and then sneaking into the top 4 is the red Academy deck, which is interesting to see if that's the same player or not. It is not a different player, but awesome to see that, you know, the red Academy Rush deck is, you know, very threatening in the meta for sure. 5th place, another Blue JJK, and then we see another Demon Slayer deck making it into the top 8 here with the Zenitsu and Inosuke deck. This is a very different way to play the deck, or at least the yellow Demon Slayer deck. You kind of focus around the two of them and, you know, really pushing some high damage out with these characters. The tandem a bit between these two can really surprise your opponent if they don't know what the deck does. Then we have a duo of the purple Code Geass bringing up 7th and 8th place. And then a Mahito, which is another deck that, you know, I feel like is a really good deck, and I think a lot of other people who know, maybe someone who plays this deck and does a really good job with it, also knows the power of the Mahito deck, which is really cool to see in 9th. And then we also had a Gojo Nobaro deck, some, you know, yellow Jujutsu Kaisen decks coming in. I do think Gojo is a really strong deck that you can play at the moment in the card game. So you can see here going down this list already a lot more interesting going on. We do have coming into the 11th place is a green Code Geass with the Suzaku. Glad to see a Suzaku coming in here. Very disappointing to see no one top with a Kurapika, a top 16 in either of these tournaments. I do think that Kurapika is in a tough spot. Only having the one raid target that you can go into in the deck makes it a little bit harder to really keep up the pace, whereas I do think Suzaku is a better deck because you have more raid targets. You have a little bit more stable of an energy line. Not to say that I think Kurapika is a bad deck, but I think it's just a little less consistent than Suzaku, and the green decks are kind of hit or miss, right? You see your pieces, you can kind of wall out your opponent with your 5k bodies, and I think that, you know, green decks take a lot more of playing them and knowing your lines, not committing, knowing when to commit too much or not enough to the board to keep you in a game. So I think that's why we don't see a ton of green decks at the moment in the card game. But going through, we have 2 more Code Geass purples bringing up the rear down here. And then another Ashford Academy Rush, which is awesome to see. Another purple code. And then bringing up the 16th place is another Tanjiro Nezuko deck. I took the data from this tournament and went and made you guys a nice little pie chart here. Let's see if I can get it on full screen. Here we go. So definitely you can see here taking up a big part of the meta is the Blue JJK at 31%, which I think is to be expected. This deck is really good, really consistent. Out of those, you know, top 16s I took, so 32 decks, that is putting this deck at 10 tops in the top 32, essentially, if you combine both the days here. So a big 3% of the meta, not quite exactly, you know, 33, but 31% of the tops being Blue JJK. I think that maybe, you know, we do have one Punch Man coming out, and maybe that does wall out Blue JJK a little bit with some of the big BPs that those decks have, but I think that Blue JJK is maybe a little too consistent, even with the pair restrictions that we currently have. And I could see maybe them trying to do something else with Blue JJK. I don't have a lot of ideas. If any of you do, you know, please leave in the description down below in the comments, like what you think could happen to, you know, notch down Blue JJK just a little bit, because I think that a lot of decks in the game are really fun, cool decks that maybe take a little bit more to get going, and even their payoff isn't crazy like what you say, like the Mahito deck and Gojo and stuff like that. They really can't keep up with the pace of Blue JJK that they're able to put on the board, and it's super consistent. I guess one idea I've seen floating out there is that you can't run Sukunas and the Yujis together, which I could see that kind of being a thing, because I do think that, you know, Yuji gives you too much of a clearing the board presence in the deck, whereas, you know, the Sukunas kind of just tap things down, and Sukuna's a little bit more of a, you know, not clearing the board, where it's just kind of tapping them down. And I think that if you take out the Sukunas and, you know, you have to play like maybe just Nanami and Yuji, now that deck is a little bit more, you're having to work to get to that, you know, top end, the Nanami, and then if you want to play the Sukunas, you kind of have to run the Sukuna route. I do think that we need to see something happen to Blue JJK, just with how insane that it is, with how much it get played and its conversion rate. But enough on the Blue JJK. I know the community has very strong feelings about this deck. It's definitely the best deck in the game, in the format. But coming up close into second is Purple Code Geass. The reason I don't feel the same about Purple Code Geass the same way as I do Blue JJK is because you don't see the numbers of Purple Code Geass getting played as you do the Blue JJKs. So there's less of the people on this deck, and I think it's because this deck does take a lot more skill. We have in the top 32 here out of the 2 tournaments 9 people placing with it, so which is also a very high number in the game. But I think that this deck takes a lot more skill and minding your resources than the Blue JJK deck does, where anyone can pick up Blue JJK, I think, and play pretty well. And I think with Code Geass, you have to manage your resources a lot more, and it really is a skill-intensive deck to, you know, pilot. That being said, it's obviously very, very strong at the moment, and you know, if you think that something needs to happen in this deck, that's totally understandable, but I do think that Purple Code Geass is in a great spot at the moment. It really rewards you being creative in your, you know, deck building. All the decks don't look the same, whereas, you know, a lot of Blue JJK decks do look the same. Purple Code Geass has a little different outlets with, you know, being able to run a lot of different just like the 2 action point drop Lelouches, and then depending on how many mechs you want to run or not. I do think the issue with the deck is that it has so many triggers, so you can get, you know, play a lot of different effects, whether it's draw triggers or the color trigger or all the different things that you have. I do think that it definitely has one of the best resources in life, but that being said, Blue JJK also has a ton of those too. But bringing up 9 spots, Purple Code Geass, definitely a really strong deck, definitely a top contender. I think that if Purple Code Geass wasn't here taking up spots, I think a lot of more people would be more outraged at Blue JJK, because I think Purple Code Geass is the only deck that can consistently have like a 50-50 with the Blue JJK, and I do think if Blue JJK sees their lines and they high roll, they just steamroll even the Code Geass deck. Coming into the 3rd spot here, we do have Yellow Demon Slayer Tanjiro decks. We have 4 of these taking up 12.5% of the tops in the top 32 here, so 4 4 of these decks getting into here. I did separate this deck with the yellow Zenitsu. We did have one yellow Zenitsu top, so that is, if you want to combine these, say that yellow Demon Slayer is taking up 15% of the meta, which I think is in a great spot, right? A lot of people were thinking that Demon Slayer wasn't going to be very powerful, and then these 2 decks are showing you that it really is a really good deck. If you take the time into this, learning this deck, you can really do really well, especially into some of these decks here. Especially Blue JJK that's trying to get to the late game. I think that Tanjiro and the Zenitsu Yellow Demon Slayer decks have a great matchup going into the Blue JJK because you're able to apply so much pressure early that maybe you get to them before they get to those, you know, having all the 4 fingers in their sideline. Going below that, though, is a deck that plays very similar to these 2 in the sense that you are trying to rush your opponent down, and that is Red Code Geass, the Academy Rush. There are 3 of these from the top 32 from these tournaments throughout the weekend. And this has been shown to be a very consistent, very fun aggro deck. I know a lot of people hate this deck when they see it sometimes, but I do like that there is a deck in the Union Arena trading card game that, you know, gives people outlet that if they want to run something low to the ground, they can. Now, granted, with this deck, I do think that a lot of your bad matchups, which are a lot of the green decks and these big walled out bodies, get taken care of by the Blue JJK and the purple Code Geass decks, that it leaves a great spot for the red Code Academy Rush deck to do very well because they don't have to see a ton of those green decks in the meta. This is also a very strong deck. Really love to see people bringing this up. I'm definitely very happy and surprised to see Demon Slayer and another Code Geass deck doing well. And then after this one, we really have just a lot of one-of placements. That's going to be all of these right here with the 3.1%. If you take all this together, that leaves you with like 20 to 30%, give or take, really like 25% of like random rogue decks, right? And I think that that's not a bad spot to be playing rogue decks. We'll touch on the green decks at the moment. The only green deck to top at 32 in these tournaments was one green Code Geass Suzaku deck. I think that green is in a bad spot because there is just, so much power between the Blue JJK and Purple Code, and these decks are very, very consistent at what they do, that it doesn't give green decks a chance to, really get to their 6, 7, 8 energy turn plays without not already being in, 3 life or less situations. But I am happy to see one top in here. Very sad not to see my boy Kurapika top in one of these tournaments, but I'll have to try to play in one soon and see if I can get the green guys getting a little bit more representation. We did touch on the Zenitsu as well, having the one top, but we'll go through the list. We do have a Muzan Purple Demon Slayer. So you can see here, Demon Slayer showing out in these tournaments. A couple of different really good decks in the set that you can play. I am surprised that Muzan is the one that has seen the tops. I really thought that Daki and Gyutaru would be the better deck, but it shows how strong the Muzan is. If you go all in on your package in these decks to, try to get into the Muzan, get your 20 cards in the graveyard as fast as possible, the Muzan just comes out and absolutely can win you a game very, very fast. Happy to see one Muzan top in. We do also have another purple deck, and this is going to be a purple JJK Mahito deck, which is awesome to see. Like I said, I think that this deck is so powerful and strong, and maybe only because I know a couple of really strong pilots who take this deck and do very, very well with it. But I do think it's a very skill-intensive deck, so that's why it doesn't see a ton of tops. But if you ever played against a Mahito deck and it's popped off against you, you know that this deck is scary. I would like to see more people playing this deck, but congratulations to whoever placed with one of these. Staying on the JJK train, we do have one Gojo player, top 32 in this that past weekend's tournaments. I think Gojo's in a great spot. I do think that he's a little too slow for what some of these other decks are trying to do out here with the 2 big boys in the meta. But I do think that he does really well into some of these earlier low to the ground aggro decks because you do have a couple double blockers. You do have ways to, keep your BP above them. So really cool to see Gojo getting a sneaking in. And then the last deck is a purple bleach deck, rounding out with one top here. I don't think that purple bleach is going anywhere. I am very surprised to not see more people playing it though. The deck has been out for a long time. I do think that the deck is showing it's more consistent than any of the Hunter x Hunter decks. So it's really, I don't know if it's because it's from the first set And so a ton of people really didn't get into the game until, you know, JJK and Code came out. So a lot of people didn't get to buy a Bleach product. But I do think the Bleach decks are really, really strong. So really happy to see one of them get a top here. I don't know why the blue or the name isn't popping up here, but this is kind of what the meta is looking like. I do think that it is a pretty healthy meta for the most case. I do think that maybe these two decks can get some kind of touch. I think touching the blue or the purple Code Geass would be a little bit harder than touching the blue JJK, because I do think that there are some easy ways to touch blue JJK, whereas I think the purple Code, it's in a spot. I think it's just a really strong, good deck, but I do think since it's so pilot-oriented, we would have to see, right? If something happens to blue JJK and then purple takes over the meta big time, I don't think that's the case, because with One Punch Man coming out, we are going to see some big BPs, and I'm going to be very happy to see, you know, how much One Punch Man can take out of the pie chart here. But I'll keep trying to do these for you guys. I'm going to try to do another one for the other card games, but I wanted to do this video really quick. Please let me know what y'all think about this video. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Please share the channel. I'm really trying to put out a lot of videos for everyone, and I love doing it. It's a lot of fun. But please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Peace.